Hi, my name is Stéphane Ganasali. I'm professor of marketing at the University Savoie-Mont Blanc. You can see my email address at the bottom of this first slide. I have the pleasure to introduce you to the design of effective market segmentation through cluster analysis. It's going to be a short presentation, and I will show also an example of that cluster analysis technique in the end of the slideshow. First, I'd like to introduce the clustering procedures. So clustering analysis is a statistical analysis that is very often used by marketing scientists with the view to identifying the market segments. There are three main stages, as you can see on the slide. First, the selection of the clustering variables. Second, the cluster analysis is going to be performed, and finally we are going to choose the final segmentation, because after the second stage there are going to be different scenarios, different outcomes, and the researcher will have to choose what is going to be the best and final segmentation. So let's see first how to identify and select the clustering variables, so the information that is going to be used by the company, by the brand, to identify, to generate the segments. So those clustering variables, they may come from internal customer database. So you know that companies have access to more and more data in their digital environment. So it could be from their customers' database. They can also perform, and they do a lot of surveys, consumer surveys, in order to get some feedback about their behaviors, their expectations. And you can also find more and more information through what we call the customers generated content. So they are the customers' feedback that are generated spontaneously, for example, on the social networks, on the websites. And those data may also be used for segmentation purposes. But it could be also, as you can see here, a combination of several sources. So for example, you can add information coming from some surveys to your internal existing customers database. Let's see now the different natures of clustering variables. So for marketing purposes, for segmentation purposes, we are mainly interested in those topics, right? We're interested in what the consumers know, how they behave, how they shop, what their opinions and motives are. So some examples are available here on the table, like for example, the knowledge they have about brands, the frequency of use, the shopping modes they prefer, the expenses they dedicated to our products and services, information about their satisfaction, their perceptions about our company, our brand, and also some consumption motives or obstacles, for example. All together, to have a relevant cluster analysis, there must be a minimum number of variables, and it's approximately 10. If you can get more, of course, it's even more interesting. In that first stage, selecting the cluster variables, you will get a databases, right? And this databases looks a bit like this one. This is fake example. So you have a certain number of cases with all your consumers or customers, and you have a certain number of clustering variables that have been measured on them. So in that case, there are 8 variables, right? Like consumption frequency, number of known brands, etc. And those variables, technically, there must be either numerical, like here, for example, from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. In that example, 1 means low and 5 means high. You can also have binary values, so measured through a 0 or a 1, for example, to identify whether the customer has the product or not. 1 for yes, 0 for no, or whether he has a certain characteristic like being French 1 or not French 0, right? So those are some formats that are applicable to the cluster analysis. Let's see how to perform the cluster analysis now. So to do that, you need a software actually. So usually you have a lot of survey and statistical software available on the market, and in almost all of those software programs, cluster analysis is one of the key functionalities. So it's sometimes named classification, but it will guide you to the cluster analysis. There are two most popular techniques available that I'm going to present today, because there are many other ones, but I want to focus on the most popular. So they are the partitioning and the hierarchical ones. In the end, you need to know that no single best algorithm exists. Then the researcher will have to compare alternative solutions and to arrive then to the best final solution. I will first explain the partitioning methods. So in that case, you can see a visual representation of the method on the right side. So at step number 1, you can see the consumers as they are positioned on a kind of map according to their position on two variables of the survey, for example. Then at step number 2, group representative positions are located. So in that case, there are two possible groups, let's say, and usually it's done randomly by the software. Two points are located, and as you can see on the step number 3, the consumers will be aggregated to the closest representative point. In that case, there will be a red group and a blue group according to the consumer's positions towards the two representative points. And then, according to those created clusters, the blue and the red, new representative positions are defined, recalculated as the center, as you can see on step number 4, of the groups. And then we perform another calculation to aggregate again the consumers to the new representative points. And the algorithm goes on like this until it will converge to the best solution. Let's explain now the hierarchical methods. So as you can see also on the right side of the screen, it is visually represented via what we call a dendrogram. So what happens in that case, consumers are grouped together according to having very similar responses to the survey, for example. So it's about the distance. So the closest consumers are put together into a unit, a group, that is afterwards represented by the average value of the two consumers being grouped together. And those units will be agglomerated again with similar units in terms of distance, being either individual consumers or other groups. And there will be a lot of different steps like this, of putting all those consumers into categories according to their similarities. There must be a stop criterion, otherwise we go to a final solution with just one final group. So those stop criteria could be determined either by the researcher, who will tell how many groups are expected in the end of the analysis, or by a statistical algorithm, for example, the Ward criterion, that is a optimal optimization of the discriminant power of the analysis. So those criteria are very often available in the statistical software. How to choose the final segmentation? So as you probably understood, in the end of the second step, we will have a lot of alternative segmentation solutions based on the different techniques that we have, either partitioning or hierarchical. And also, there could be different solutions based on the number of clusters, 3, 4 clusters, for example. So, in the following step, clusters need to be interpreted and named by the researchers according to their mean values on the clustering variables. I will explain it through the following example. The clustering variables are the variables that we used for the classification process. So the researchers will have to assess all the different solutions and choose the best one according to a certain number of criteria. Some of those criteria are purely statistical, like for example, some statistical test values like the Fisher test, calculated on the clustering variables. We also are looking at the best discrimination power calculated on segments profiling variables, that are other variables that were not used for the classification, but that could be very useful to understand the segments and to describe them. And another criterion is the interpretability of the solution. So you can get 4 different groups and have some problems in understanding them, in interpreting them. So if you have another solution which is more comfortable in terms of interpretation, the researcher should go for that other solution. So I'm going to present you an example as an illustration of that cluster analysis technique based on a survey conducted on tourists. So we have a survey of 500 tourists in French region. So as clustering variables, we are using a set of 10 Likert square questions, so they are numerical, about the importance of some criteria in the perfect holiday. So there are 10 criteria, as you can see here on the slide. The importance of the water and sun in the perfect holidays, the importance of sports, of contacts, of having organized activities, the importance of being in a lively environment, but also the importance of comfort, of nature, of having an all-inclusive offer, quietness, and finally the importance of being in family during those perfect holidays. So I will show you through the software now. So now we can see screenshots from the software. The very first step is basically to select the clustering variables out of the list of the variables available in the survey, right? So in that case, we are selecting 10 variables, as we mentioned before, related to the importance of the various criteria for the perfect holidays. Then we can visualize the clusters. Here you can see 4 groups that were created through a partitioning technique called k-means. So there are 4 groups according to the number of groups that were defined by the researcher, but it could be also automatic and generate another solution. If you go more in the details and you try to interpret the clusters and name them, this is what we did here, you can see their mean values on the 10 variables that were used to perform the cluster analysis. So for example, the first class were called the social authentics. Why? Because as you can see on the right side, they give little importance to comfort, to nature, to all-inclusive, to being in the family, or being in a organized environment. They want to have something lively in terms of their holidays atmosphere, and they would like to practice sports. The clubbers the number 2 are very high for water and sun, for sports. They expect organized activities and also a lively atmosphere, and they are fine with getting inclusive offers. The third group were called the grandpas, because they want to have some quiet holidays, being in the family. They expect also inclusive offers, comfort. The natural families are the highest for family dimension, and they also are looking for quietness, but they are not expecting anything specially organized, nor very comfortable. So then we can interpret and name our clusters. This is very important, of course, for presenting the segmentation and guide the marketing team into the different promotional activities, for example. The final point is how to profile the clusters. So a part of those 10 variables that we used as clustering variables, there are other information available in the survey. So we crossed the classification variable with other information available in the survey to better understand, to better describe the various clusters that we have, the 4 ones. So for example, we crossed this classification variable with the activities they like to perform, the type of accommodation they stay in, but also some social demographics like the age or the occupation. And we also considered in that example some resources they allocate, for example, for restaurants. So as you can see, there are some other information very interesting. For example, if we are talking about the clubbers, the ones we called the clubbers, the group number 2, we can see the activities they like in that region. And we also can see where they are mainly staying, what is their age. As you can see, they are apparently the youngest category in the survey. Their occupation are also mentioned, and they don't allocate so much budget for a restaurant. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for watching. I have presented also some additional readings that could be very interesting to go more into the details of those statistical techniques. My goal was to show you how they could be very useful for marketing segmentation and marketing purposes in general. Thank you for watching.